Squint.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the Arty Surveyor of website builders. As he hit his 100th cap this weekend, Scott Robertson figured he had to commemorate the day in some special way. So he headed to Squarespace, the world's easiest to use website builder. There he was able to, in a mere hour, compile a very definitive online RD museum, which Grant Lisbeth can pore over for days. A full breakdown of how he plays the game and his various achievements, with mailing lists set up to automatically send out future accolades and a store to buy merch, all set up with a few clicks of a button. It was so simple, so easily put together. Grant Lisbeth ended up missing the game for commentary because he was just browsing through it. No expertise required from Robertson. And if you want to do the same and build your own beautiful website so easily, you can head to the link in the description and use the offer code SQUIDRUGBY to save yourself several money and potentially distract Grant Nisbet for weeks to come. 51 games and counting. The All Blacks put their unbeaten Eden Park run on the line this Saturday, eventually defeating the Springboks in a hugely impressive display, a performance worth dissecting. And yeah, with Sanzar being so strict on footage use of this Rugby Championship, we sat down to discuss the game, break down where it was won, where it was lost, and what this means for both teams going forwards. So it's the consistently misleading thing about statistics in rugby union, right? That if you look at this game, the Springboks dominate territory and possession. They made more meters. They made more post-contact meters, more gain line carries. They've had more phases of possession. Pretty much every stat, the Springboks came out on top of, or a lot of them. And yet, if you were to watch this game, for most of the game, for the first 65 minutes, it felt like the All Blacks were completely on top.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that really illustrates how close international rugby is, isn't it? That you consider a game like this, and, you know, between number 1 and 2 in the world, respectively, you looked at the All Blacks having a 2-score lead, and you looked at that and thought, oh, this is a demolition. Yeah. It's a pure demolition. And then all it takes is one moment of brilliance for the Springboks, and suddenly you're looking up at the scoreboard again and going, oh, wait, this is a 1-score game now.
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting game in that the All Blacks were so on top, I think, for 65 minutes. I think it's quite hard to argue that if you're a Springbok fan, right? Yeah. That first half in particular, and they pulled it back even in the first stage of the second half, but that first half, the Springboks were so far off that game. I will get into that in a moment. But I think the All Blacks were just excellent. Yeah. And they were just at a consistent level of excellency. And it didn't feel like they were putting in like against Ireland in the World Cup, right? The last World Cup in 2023. It felt like they were like, this is our performance we're building towards and we're delivering on everything, and they were so accurate. They didn't drop a single ball in that game, right? And yet it wasn't like that. There were still errors and misgivings in the All Blacks, but it was just like our base level of performance is so high that we can maintain this at all times. And that was how it felt.
Yeah, 100%. Holding the Springboks until 60 minutes until they get their opportunity to creep into the game is what is considered a dominant performance, even for a team like the All Blacks. Do you look at like the likes of Italy in this summer, or in Ireland even when they played last summer, right? You're looking at 90-odd seconds before the Springboks have their moment of going, no, we're the dominant team, we're going to put the foot on the throat here, you know? And instead, for the All Blacks, it was what felt like, and some of this is kind of an allusion to a rugby fan, what felt like an entirely dominant performance was them just shushing what the Springboks kept throwing at them for the first 60 minutes. Because it's not like the Springboks, as you mentioned there with the possession territory stats, it's not like they didn't have opportunities.
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? If you look at this performance, there's an awful lot of things that the Springboks just get wrong, right? So Andre Pollard falling over as he goes to win a crossfield bomb. Deeply funny moment. People have watched him do that thousands of times over the last few years. And yet that is just an individual error, right? Yeah. But an awful lot of these errors are caused by the All Blacks being exceptional. So like this line out, the way that Wallace Atiti just shoots through the line out, gets in the way. The Springboks have clearly got to move their running, but the moment it gets beyond the 15, there's no offside line anymore. So Atiti can just come through and he gets in the way so that the pass can't come down to Grant Williams and therefore throws the whole move off. The Springboks tried to run, I think it might even be the same play, but they ran just a similar thing of ball to the tail of the line out, off there to Grant Williams. Williams gets his timing wrong. Yeah. And I don't know if that's an individual error or if that is him being thrown off by how many times the All Blacks have got through disrupted previously, and the only time they don't, then suddenly he's thrown off and he drops the ball.
It does happen as a scrum half where, you know, the hooker or the umbrella, whoever, gets through to you once and you kind of got it in the corner of your eye, the back of your mind, that they might be chasing you down once again, that they're going after you. And Grant Williams, again, like he has this moment here where he goes for a bit of a snipe and he falls over straight away, kind of unprompted. And granted, a lot of that comes down to the slippery conditions and so on. But yeah, it was one of those where the All Blacks clearly really targeted Grant Williams because he's a brilliant player when you give him lots of space to run in, because his kicking game is excellent and he's really, he's the quickest player in the Springboks squad. It's documented as such. And so the All Blacks took that as an opportunity to go, brilliant, let's just give him as little space as possible. And let's force him to make really fast decisions. And that was... Grant Williams, I think, has excelled in the large parts of his international rugby career so far. But this was a game where the All Blacks pack really got through to him.
Yeah, I think he's often quite a slow decision maker, and that sometimes counts against him, to say he's someone who's so physically fast. But then you look at just the other ways in which the All Blacks were able to disrupt them, right? So I think the most destined to be iconic is the All Blacks putting a halt, putting a kind of like tombstone on the maul move. So we put a video up on our second channel, More Squid Rugby, where we went through like how can teams potentially disrupt and stop this move, or is it just going to be an undefendable thing that the Springboks ran against Italy, where off a line out, they then move that lifting pod back round and throws them again, and they form a maul in the middle of the pitch and try and target back to try and get on top, right? They scored off that against Italy. Unsurprisingly, they brought it out again here against the All Blacks. And yet the All Blacks got right in amongst it.
Yeah. They also, bear in mind, tried this against the Wallabies in the dying minutes as well, and it didn't really work out. They tried a variation where they went ball off the top, and it didn't quite work. They lost the ball one phase later. And in this case, the All Blacks had clearly really done their research on how to stop this. So the difference between a line-out and an open play lifting pod, if you will, the line-out needs a gap.
Yeah.
And the gap has to be respected until the line-out is called over by the referee. In this, obviously, it's open play, and the maul hasn't yet been formed.
The offside line also in a maul remains until either it's advanced forward or back, at which point it remains like your side, right?
Yeah.
Or it is the moment the ball goes beyond the 15 and leaves the line-out kind of zone. That is not the case when the ball is lifted out this ruck and then played there.
Because the offside line doesn't yet exist.
No.
So they have a chance to get into this
It no longer
position.
exists, and it doesn't yet exist. Like, you're in this area where there's no offside line.
Absolutely. Whereas in a line-out, there is a pre-existing offside line, and there's no kind of like lull period, void of offside, let's say. So Tupou Vaa'i and Scott Barrett both play an absolute blinder in this. Particularly love Tupou Vaa'i's intervention here, as he comes around the back.
But if you rewind before this, right, the moment the Springboks, they send it off the top, they send it crashing up the middle, and we can see here, Tupou Vaa'i is looking up and he points out. Du Toit and Khaleesi stack behind each other, and Vaa'i goes, this is it. They're running the move. He's clearly watched endless tape of this in the week, right? And that's clearly a celebration in the moment. That he knows exactly how they set beforehand. He sees Khaleesi and Du Toit as the first two players take their position, and he goes, okay, we're setting for this. Scott Barrett spots the same thing like a split second later before he can even hear Vai's call, and the two of them just get ready, right? Yeah. And so when the Springboks do set into that position, the 2 second rows are set slightly wider, and they can then work around. They don't have to come in front on, and smartly, the All Blacks don't engage initially head on.
Yes, because in order for this to be called as a maul, there have to be 2 players from each team contesting this tackle area. And obviously the ball has to be available, otherwise it's called as obstruction, right? And so that is a part of the Springboks' own strategy, is that they can't shield Pieter-Steph du Toit around the ball, because otherwise they'll give away a penalty. So as they try and lay the ball back, and this is the really smart bit, so there's no offside line, and Tupou Vaa'i comes into this kind of like cushion here. And importantly, he targets the limbs. He targets the transfer of the ball. Because in order for this to not be obstruction, and in order to make sure that they can get the ball back without any fear of having the ball stripped, they have to try and transfer it back from Du Toit all the way to the back of this maul. And instead, Vaa'i targets that and stops it getting there in the first place. And so, if I've got a rugby ball in my hand,
which you do,
and you slap my arm, chances are I'm going to drop it.
Yeah.
Especially if that's coming from the mighty arm of Tupou Vaa'i.
Yeah. And if you look at Scott Barrett's involvement as well, he goes in on the guy in front, right? So he disconnects the ball carrier from their support, meaning that Tupou Vaa'i can go in one-on-one. And I think a little bit it's them hedging the bets. They don't quite who's got the ball in that moment, but it allows them to then isolate the ball carrier and cause that knock-on. And at the very least here, right, it's going to be a tackle, and most of the Springbok pack are going to be in front. So it's going to allow a pretty good turnover chance for Vaa'i or Barrett. And best case scenario is exactly what happens here.
Yeah.
So it works out brilliantly. They did their homework, and that was just a real case, right? There were so many of the Springboks trademark plays that we've seen over the last year that just weren't able to work, right? And I think this became a big theme for me of the game, is that Springbok team, if you look at their 15, right? The Springboks have, other than maybe France, the most depth in the world. And that means a couple of things, right? One is obviously, if a player gets injured, they can fill them in. But more importantly, they can pick a team based on game plan, right? And they can deploy the team based on how they want to play that day. And that Springbok team, to me, seemed like it was selected to play wide, expansive rugby. The kind of Tony Brown model we've talked about them running in past, where they are looking to get the ball into the wide spaces. They're looking to run lots of little passes. You can kind of tell by the inclusion of Villy the Roux, right, who is possibly the best passer available in all of South Africa, right? He's just a brilliant passer of the ball and brilliant rugby brain, so you want him running your attack, right? There was literally one time in the game where they used le Roux for their passing option, where they got him into a bit of space to throw that wide ball over the top. And it went really well and almost led to a try for Chestnut Colby, but for a brilliant intervention from Ardie Savea. So we're looking at, this is how they're set up to play, and then it tipped it down with rain. And it feels a little bit like the All Blacks, right, came in with a general team who can adapt on the fly. If they're 10 minutes in, they're playing attacking rugby, they can then go, in a moment, oh, it started raining, we'll adapt and play kicking rugby now, or adapt and play wet weather rugby. The Springboks feels a little bit like they have infinite game plans. They have infinite ways they can play, more than any other team in the world, by some distance for me. And yet, they don't quite seem as good, they're not as good as the All Blacks at least, of transitioning between plan A and plan B and plan C. So that became a bit of an issue for them, was it felt like they were continuing to play the game plan they set out for, at least they had a team deployed to do that, and they weren't able to then excellently change to the more kicking, the kind of game plan we think of the Razzie era, that kind of 2019 era game plan. They couldn't slip back to it as easily, right? That Grant Williams is not a strong box kicker as I like Faf de Klerk or even Cobus Reinach, who came on the bench and did a great job of that.
Certainly not for length. He's very good on uncontestable, but for length, he doesn't have that. And they were much more reliant on Andre Pollard.
What we saw was the All Blacks a couple of times put pressure on him and cause him to miss hit or even like not even hit his, and he got, you know, one half charge down as well. And that became a real issue for them. And then you look at the back three, right? And Villy the Roux is a genius rugby player. He is not their best option in the high ball. And in terms of chasing the high ball, you want Curtly Arronson in there because he's probably the best in the world at chasing high balls, right? And getting that slap back. Instead, they went for Kane Moody, who is, you know, obviously a very good player in the air. But ideally, you want that. And I suspect if Razzie could have picked his team 5 minutes before kickoff, football style, he probably would have gone for Apalele Farsi at fullback and then Arronson on the wing.
100%, especially when you look at the way that the All Blacks kicked. And I think that was one of the more impressive parts of the game, was the way that they adapted to that wet weather. You look at this one that Geordie Barrett slotted in nice and early. The All Blacks are under loads of pressure here, and he bangs it down the middle really low. This is a nightmare to catch, and Kane Moody actually does a brilliant job to regather this in the end, because 9 times out of 10, most players are probably dropping that.
Bowden Barrett here hitting 50-22 when they've gone to stick in a little chip in behind, a little like put pressure on the touchlines, put the fullback under pressure and try and, you know, cause some damage because their forward pack are playing very well. And then Bowden just goes bam and hits a 50-22 off his wrong foot.
Switching that onto his left and changing the angle of his kick. Really, really smart, when previously the All Blacks have been going for a little bit of the aerial contest, certainly on the right-hand side. But it's the All Blacks definitely showed a lot more kind of adaptability. I think Finlay Christie as well had a very good game in terms of his aerial kicking.
I thought kicked very well.
I think the most obvious kind of setup of that was the lead up to the try for Aroni Narawa.
Yes. So this is superb, right? And it comes off the All Blacks winning a kicking battle, of putting pressure on and managing to gain the line out just outside the 22. And from there, they go for an immediate move. And this is really, really smart bit of play. It's something Scott Robertson talked about in his first game as All Black head coach against England. He was asked about why aren't you looking for more cross kicks? The England defence is so aggressive. And he went, well, the thing is, if you want to bring a winger up properly, you've got to do it 2 out, right? And this is exactly what he does here. But because at this moment, they don't have David McKenzie on yet as an alternate playmaker, they devise the whole move around it. So they really smartly throw to the front of the line out, right? And the Springboks are the Springboks, right? They go, you want to maul against us? In the first minute? Yeah, all right. So Etzebeth goes like, I smell blood here. And the rest are like, dinner. And they all cave in and go, brilliant. We are here to do a murder. They'll commit to this maul, and Ardie Savea goes, pranked, and then spins the ball out to Finlay Christie, who's filled into that fly half role, right? So that Savea can play 9, Finlay Christie becomes 10, and Bowden Barrett then, he's played plenty of rugby at fullback, he essentially becomes that 15 channel, right? So you then look at Kane Moody on this wing, is flying up into line. He's going, okay, they're playing out the back. The All Blacks have got 2 players dotted in behind, and both of them are running really good lines, kind of getting right, and looking like there's such a disconnect here in the Springbok line. They are so used to teams attacking this, right? Of they keep LaRue out wide in case there's a kick going in or anything, and then they keep the winger in narrow so they can shoot in and cut this off. Every team tries to attack this space, right? The All Blacks don't. The All Blacks go, okay, we know you think we're going to do that. Instead, Bowden is going to drop it pinpoint on his toe.
Yeah. The other benefit of them throwing to the front of the line is the impact it has on Geordie Barrett's line.
Yeah.
As he's running this dummy cut with Bowden Barrett, and feasibly, you look at Rico Ioane filling in the back as well, he doesn't give his line away at all, what he's trying to run. You could think that what the All Blacks are doing here is looking to attack back to that blind side, back the way that they came. And obviously, as a winger, the thing that is most frustrating in the world is when like your guard hasn't worked out far enough, which means that everyone else has to jam in one and you've suddenly got to mark 2 players in front of you, you know? And it's kind of the set piece equivalent of that, is them going to the front means that the whole Springbok pack are tied in here, and so when Barrett goes for that little cutback on the inside, it's believable that they might want to attack a space around there. And instead, they're all still over there. So Bowden Barrett drops on the toe to Narrower, who is quite crucially as well, on his own out here.
Yeah.
They've put so much trust in both Narrower and Will Jordan at fullback. Narrower to stay on his feet if he does get tackled, and Will Jordan to cover so much ground to get across there. And Villy LaRue goes for a Year 7 disco knee slide as a consequence.
So if the All Blacks were to, and I think this is how a lot of teams will run this move, put an edge forward out here, right, alongside, or put Will Jordan alongside, so you've got a second player in support, or even just in that like slightly wider channel, it isn't as well sold, right? So Moody hedges his bets a little bit more. He can't afford to do that here because he goes, okay, I've got to cut off all their options. And he goes for the option, right, that cuts off every option except the cross kick.
Yeah.
So then when Bowden does go for the cross kick, suddenly it leaves Narrower one-on-one with Villy LaRue.
Yeah.
And
I think part of why LaRue falls over is because he gets his positioning slightly wrong, because he's given himself more space than normal to cover that, because he's thinking they're not going to go for it.
Exactly. LaRue isn't seeing this coming, right? So he is looking up and he's going, okay, they're going to put him on the outside channel. Kanan's probably going to get to him and like scrag him and I might have to finish him off.
Sure.
Right? So he then has to, like, last second, you see him turn physically and sprint, right? And that then causes him, like, he's slightly off balance already. And then when Nara has to dive, like cricket style, and regather the ball, he then falls in turn, falls over him, and Narrow is then pretty much in the clear. Now, the Springbok defence is so built on fail-safes. That is their whole thing, is like, okay, there are ways you can get round or through or past us, but every single one of them, we have someone getting them in advance, right?
Yeah.
Most famously inventing the catch-up defender. But we have Cheslin Kolbe herring it across from the far wing, doing a really good job to get across. His job is just to get there and smash them to buy the defence tracking back, in this case, Kenan Moody, the time they need to make the tackle or to get into position or to reset, right? That is Colby's whole job here. It is just to buy time for other defenders. That is what his role in the system is. And yet, instead, he just kind of stands there, right? He gets into the position and he goes for the intercept. And look, if you have ever played fullback or wing, it is the first thing you're taught is always in a one-on-one situation, go for the ball carrier and force them to make the pass, right?
Yeah.
Because they're more likely to knock it on and or throw the pass forward or drop it or not get the pass away than they are to like give it to you or, you know, whatever else. Like, that is the safest decision to make. It's the like highest percentage play. Colby doesn't do that.
Especially inches out from the touchline.
Yeah.
He goes for an all or nothing option and lands on nothing.
He lands on nothing.
Happens.
Yeah.
When I don't know, I just don't think this is necessary in this scenario. And yeah, he jumps in the way, Narrower throws the dummy, but you can't help but wonder, and obviously like we're saying this in our glass houses. In this scenario, I also wouldn't tackle a running Narrower. However, you can't help but wonder, because Cheslin Kolbe is extremely strong as well. I know that he's a smaller winger in profile to Narrower, but he is very strong and he is known to bully people twice his size. It's one of his character traits.
And
right?
with respect, right, Narrow is not Jonah Lomu.
Yeah.
Like, the size differential is not like David and Goliath.
It's not extortionate, is it? And I don't know, there's a part of you that wonders, can you just keep him in the corner? And even, as you say, if he has to offload, you can't guarantee that offload's going to be accurate. And there is cover coming across here in Kanan Moody, who can get the tackle in and at least keep Will Jordan in the corner here. If not, try and force him slightly closer to the touchline, you know? It's a bit of a confusing one. It's obviously manipulated by the fact that the All Blacks have devised a brilliant set-piece move to work around this defence and to force these errors by LaRue and put Kolbe in a very difficult situation. And so it's easy to over-egg that. But yeah, credit to Razor and apparently Wayne Smith now, who's back involved.
Lurking. lurking in the back of the coach's box. They then struck pretty much immediately afterwards with Will Jordan turning up and, surprising this game, actually catching a ball because he seemed to forget how to use his hands and inevitably running it and scoring because it's an All Black Test match, so obviously that's what he does.
Yeah.
And it's a really smart, simple move. And I think the Springboks should be really disappointed they conceded off that, right? This is the move the All Blacks are probably running to get some gain line ball, to get 5-10 metres over the gain line, not to score on first phase.
Yeah. You look at Malcolm Marks as the man they're targeting here. He's in the receiver position on defensive ball.
He's critically about 5 metres out from the touchline, right? He's way in field.
Yeah. So they overthrow the back of the line out where Wallace Atiti catches this ball. And he does an excellent job on this. He really, really straightens up. And they have 2 options running off Atiti here. They have Geordie Barrett on the outside just to hold Pollard to make sure he can't come in and gang tackle on Atiti and force an error there. And Will Jordan is obviously the man who scores the try running on the inside. And Malcolm Marks, to his credit, does really well to actually get to Will Jordan in the first place. And I think the thing that would disappoint Felix Jones is the fact that Marks falls off this tackle on a smaller man, you know. I think a lot of that I do feel for Marks in wet conditions.
This comes back to a kind of theme of the things that worked well for the All Blacks, right, offensively, were often things where they were going to stretch and test the Springboks fail-safes that we talk about, right? So here, the idea is that they've got 2 players who are in position to make the tackles, but their fail-safe is Malcolm Marks will hair it across from 5 metres in from that receiver position, from the hooker position, right? And what they're doing is they're putting Will Jordan in a situation where he will essentially be one-on-one with a hooker who is coming in on the angle and getting there late, right? And the ground is wet, so he'll obviously move slower, and the conditions are slippery, right? So he's more likely to fall off the tackle. So it allows Jordan to get through there because they've made sure that the player they're targeting is the fail-safe rather than the key defender.
Yeah, bang on. And they did a really good job of stretching the Springboks there. I think, as we mentioned earlier, there was a bit of a lull where the Springboks managed to stop them making clean line breaks.
Yeah.
But you do then have to look into the second half. There was a huge turning point where the Springbok men got a very dominant scrum, which was game turning and kind of showed you that as long as you have a good scrum, you can always be in a game.
Yes.
You know? In the lead up to the Malcolm Marks try.
Yeah. So they've just run this set move, right, where Reinach has made quite a nice initial run, then popped off to Diolande. But critically, right, Reinach here, it's the nature of passing a ball in rugby, right? It always looks like it's going forward if you stop dead still, right? It's just like the momentum thing. He wants to just carry on here. Instead, he stops still. It makes the pass look forward.
Take the hit.
When if he just kept running and taking the hit, as you say, like, he probably gets away with this. However, turns out, we weren't to know it's a tactical forward pass. He did it deliberately so they could get a scrum.
A TFP.
And, yes. And the Springboks go fully into beast mode, fully just nail themselves in moments of the year with this, and win the ball against the head. The Kiwi commentator calls it a tight head because they're old school. And from there, they wrap blindside and start going to pick and goes. And it only takes them 3 to get over the line because there's such great, brilliant attention to detail.
Yeah. You look here on the final pick and go. You've got Simon Parker in the guard position. You've got Ardi Savir in the bodyguard position. And they're both in like decent enough positions, you know. But as you say, it's the detail of this Springbok men attack that really like turns us from a decent carry into a try. You look at the work of Lou Diaka here on the outside latch, who is here to just create some separation in between Parker and Savir and targets Savir's right arm, essentially, just to stop him from being able to back Parker up and turn this into, I would say, a 1v1 carry, but it's more of a 2v1 carry in favour of the Springboks.
So Marks is really smart in the carry. He looks to try and get on Parker's chest here, the upper chest, rather than allowing Parker to initiate contact with his shoulder. Parker's on, his second cap, so he probably does want to learn to get slightly lower, slightly earlier, but that's like, it's not a huge problem against most teams, but Marks gets so fast onto his chest, and it allows him to be upright enough for Peter Toy to get in behind on the ball and drive him over the line, turning it into this 2-on-1, because they're able to just get in on like slightly too high. And we are talking like that much, like 1.5 inches maybe, difference in height, right? But that's the margin in international rugby, right? Like that 1.5 inches too high allows the Springboks to make 1.5 inches too much further, kind of geographically, over the try line. Yeah,
especially when you don't have Ardi Savir as one of the strongest players in order to back you up. And you mentioned the importance of Peter Toy getting behind the ball there. In this scenario, everyone wants to hold the ball up and get the free clearance kick.
Yeah.
And instead, Toy is like, if anyone's ripping this ball, it's me. Because then I can put it down, or I can stop someone from getting their hands under it, and I can force it onto the floor. It's really clever by both Du Toit and also Lou Diaka.
And this is the thing the Springboks got in them, right? Like, they were blown out of the game over the opening chunk, and then suddenly they have one good scrum, and they're always going to have like a scrum that's strong, and they're always going to have that kind of detail when Razzie Rasmus is their coach, and they have that coaching ticket. So even in a game where they're playing, frankly, as badly as they were, they can always put those things back together. And they've always got things to keep them back in the game and get them back in there. And we then saw that again moments later with Cobus Reinach's try, which again is incredibly smart, incredibly well taken.
Yeah.
So it comes off a scrum, right? And I really like Jesse Creel's line here. So he works inwards against the grain, and it just gets the All Blacks thinking, okay, they're hitting in this way, right? When their plan is always to work overs and work out towards the touchline. Instead, Creel and kind of everyone else actually going with him and moving inwards means it kind of throws their defence off and causes them to all step inwards a bit. And it means then when they work around to the far side, the next hit-up then comes, right? And it catches them slightly off guard. You have the forwards start to work round. You have Tubo Vai gets out there. The two centres are both out there. They make the tackle. They get them to ground. And suddenly, right, the All Blacks have gone, okay, they're not working inwards, they're working outwards. Yeah. And their whole mindset has changed.
Yeah, it's how quickly the Springboks men are working around the corner here. Yeah. That really makes the difference as well. You look at Fabian Holland, who works around the corner really nicely, does a great job, gets in a really good position. But in this scenario, this close to the line, you've got to keep your head on swivel here. You want to be looking break down in front of me, break down in front of me, anything on the outside, break down, you know, and instead, because he's so stressed by the speed of ball for the Springboks, he just keeps his head right in front of him, which is why, when he advances forward, it creates that little gap on his inside for Cobus Reinach to sneak through. He's unbelievable at taking these opportunities, Reinach, this close to the try line. It's a speciality.
Yeah. So he just looks up, he sees a forward overworking, and slides right round and goes over. Really well taken. Like, I thought he was superb when he came off the bench.
Definitely.
And yet, it's one of the themes of this game, right? Is the tries coming from players with just a handful of caps not quite looking fast enough.
Sure.
Right? So if you then look at Quintu Paya's try, and it's a very similar situation. The All Blacks have got into a really good position. They're really, putting pressure on the line here. Pressure. And it thins out the Springbok numbers until eventually they're left with, they've got Peter Steph in here, kind of as the last forward out. And Ethan Hooker has been really isolated here. He's left with a lot of ground to cover. Now, Jesse Creel can cover this ground no problem because he's done it 50 odd times, right, in a Springbok jersey. Ethan Hooker, this is his first time being in the situation. I've seen him do it plenty of times for the Sharks, right? But it's a different deal at international level. One, they move much quicker, but two, there's another bollard in the middle of the pitch in the form of Wallace Titi, a Harndre bollard, if you will.
Nice.
He is just like plonked here as an obstacle he has to work round, right? Like, if this was a video game, right, and Hooker could pass through a player who doesn't have the ball, it's no problem, and he covers it easily. However, as it is, he initially goes inside because he's Rico Ioane runs a brilliant line in the back, and he goes, oh, this is going behind to Rico Ioane, who's going to come on an arcing line. I'll go up to shut him down. He's also kind of hedging his bets a little bit and going like, okay, if it goes to Bowden Barrett as well, if he goes himself, I've got him covered, right? What he probably wants to do instead is work on the outside, so it allows him, if they do work outside at all, to come back in and then trust Peter Steph to get to Barrett as that option, right? You leave your inside man with one guy to cover and you cover the other three, right? Instead, he doesn't go for that. He just shoots right up to put more pressure on, which is understandable, right? But it then allows Barrett to target him and put that ball into Quintu Paya coming on the angle.
It's one of those smart plays with the All Blacks where you're kind of banking on playing against quite a smart defender, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Hooker, what he's going for here is really great.
Yeah.
That he's trying to double job both centres because they're running in different directions, kind of X formation. But as you mentioned, Satiti playing as like a pawn in chess.
Yes.
Just guarding the two of them behind him. It makes such a difference because if Hooker does start 3 or 4 steps wider, because the way he is, it's basic geometry. He wants to go diagonally to catch the two of them. But instead, if he starts a little bit wider to try and shoot up, you know what Satiti would do? He'd go a couple of steps wider himself, and then he'd cut that inward line to try and score himself, just to try and take that ball off the scrum half and crash over.
Yeah. So really well worked, really well finished then by Quintu Paya, like a really good line.
Yeah.
Takes it really nicely. It looks really simple from the initial angle, then you look at it and you're like, oh, actually, like, Satiti's line, Ioane's line, like, it's the detail the All Blacks bring, right?
Satiti's played a blinder
Yeah.
as a human shield.
Incredibly smart from the players who don't touch the ball.
Yes.
They're the key elements here. Similar to the Springbok try of Dutoy, right? Again,
And also, Quintu Paya steps Peter Steph Dutoy in the way over here, which is pretty damn impressive. So we've got to give him his props for that.
But then the Springboks just like, we saw, obviously they got the 2 tries to get back into the game, but so often their attack was just sort of disjointed. And I think there's this example here, right, where It gets given as obstruction, and I think that's very, very fair. I think it is, ultimately. I think Creel is fine, but Sasha Feinberg and Gomezulu here runs a really selfish line, and I think this became a bit of a problem with the Springboks, right, when they got into a panic situation when they needed to score try desperately, and a lot of players try to take on too much themselves. And this line from Feinberg and Gomezulu, you only run if you're getting the ball. If not, it's going to be obstruction, right? So there's two other players here. He's got to think about them. He's got to think about that.
So instead, congested, isn't it?
Yeah. Instead, he just takes dynamism out of the attack and closes off the options and gives away the penalty. And it was just little things like that, little details where they've got to kind of stop and reassess and get players to think about the wider picture rather than just their own game, which 100%. Became a bit of an issue with the Springboks.
Yeah. And that frustration mounted up towards the end. You look at Quacker Smith picking up the yellow card with about 10, 15 minutes to go, where the All Blacks were playing under advantage and he then decides, I'm just going to kill the ball here. I just think there's very little subtlety around this.
So penalty's already been given. Cole Dixon has his arm out, and Quagga Smith goes, I don't want to defend a bunch of phasers. I want to kill this ball. And what he's got to do here, right, is just come in and smash the ruck and just fall over the top of it.
Yeah. Just go, oh no, the ball's come loose.
Yeah, exactly. Or even get in there and try and put a foot in there or something, right? What he does instead is he just goes straight in the side and picks it up, right? Which is the most blatant, I am trying to kill the ball, I don't want to defend another phase here, right? It's so simple. All you've got to do is cheat more subtly and he gets away with this.
Yeah.
Essentially, the yellow card is for him cheating wrong rather than him cheating at all.
Yeah, that seems fair because as soon as he does it, the ball's in his hands, it's straight whistle blow, seen it, and as a referee, you're a human being, you look at that and you straight away think that's a yellow card offence, rather than you do something quite subtle and you kind of go, maybe, and weigh it up.
Also, as a back row forward at professional level, got to know the referee you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And Carl Dixon is someone who, as a referee, is a little bit hot-headed, right? And if he sees something and he thinks it's a card, he will give it straight away. He's always been
in a very consistent manner, but
always, yeah, exactly. That's him. I'm not saying hot-headed in the fact that he loses his head.
No.
Just in he will react emotionally if something annoys him, right?
Yeah.
He will give a penalty, he'll give a yellow card immediately. He will upgrade something immediately to a red card. That's always been kind of who he is as a referee. And you've got to kind of know
You don't mess with him.
You've got to know that, this is a referee who will give a yellow card in an instant. And I just think it's a really daft decision from Quagga Smith. All he's got to do is be more subtle.
Yeah.
Kill the ball in a more subtle manner rather than coming in the side. As it is, it's a fair yellow card for the sheer daftness of it.
Because giving away a penalty instead of letting the All Blacks play under advantage, the All Blacks who have Bowden Barrett and Damien McKenzie in their
team,
fine.
By the way. That's not a bad decision.
Honestly, that is a good decision. To give away a penalty in that scenario, to cheat in that scenario, is a good decision.
Look at how good Mauro Toge is at this, right? And it's just, or even, Ebenezer Sia Khaleesi are both very good at it.
Yeah.
It's just
Adi Save, brilliant.
Yeah. But, instead it leads to this that I don't think it's that controversial a yellow card.
Not at all.
I think it's kind of fine. I would have given the same yellow card in the moment of just being what
Quacker took the sacrifice.
Right? Exactly. And then didn't leave the pitch. And then just lingered around on the pitch until the judge was like, no, seriously, get off. So this leaves us in a situation, right, where the All Blacks have taken the number 1 spot in the world rankings. The Springboks have slipped off it for the first time since the World Cup. And it leaves us with a question, 2 years out from the World Cup and with another test remaining, do you think this is fair? Do you think the All Blacks are currently a better team than the Springboks, or was this just a one-off game at Eden Park with all the factors that comes with?
It's a tough question because you made the point earlier about adaptability, and on the day, the All Blacks were the more adaptable team, and that was what won them the game. And with that in mind, I would say, yes, the All Blacks do look slightly better. However, if you were to take both teams on a 10 out of 10 day, I would back the Springboks every single day of the week, right?
Do you think?
Yeah, but also you can't bank on that always being the case. Sometimes there will be a horrific downpour going on. Sometimes someone will have a bad game. Sometimes there'll be mistakes, there'll be penalties, there'll be all sorts.
I think you're right. I think the Springboks 9 or 10 is better than, out of 10, as a performance, is better than the All Blacks. And I think they hit those levels more frequently.
Yeah.
But the All Blacks 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 are all better than the Springboks.
Yeah, spot on.
So you kind of go, well, actually, we're in a situation now where there are so many good teams in Tier 1 Test Rugby and Wales. And that leaves us with this case, right, where anyone can beat anyone except Wales. Everyone can beat Wales. Wales just can't beat the other. Wales beat Japan once. That's fine. But we're in the situation, right, where because it's so even and because the gap between number 1 and number 6 is closer than it's ever been in the history of international rugby, we suddenly, right, I think it probably is fair that the team that is more consistent on an average day probably is the number one team in the world.
Yeah, yeah. But that said, if I were a Springbok men fan, I wouldn't be too worried by this. I wouldn't be too alarmed. I wouldn't be thinking like this is the end of, these players need dropping this, that and the other. I would kind of go like, there were a few mistakes in there that wouldn't be made on another day, because this Springbok team is famously so accurate and detailed in everything they do. And being inaccurate on this game and, arguably the Wallabies game the other week as well, doesn't turn them into a bad team overnight.
This is a discussion for another time, but there will have to be a question, I think. If they built so much depth, is it time to use that instead of the old heads that they've been relying on for so long?
Yeah, it's a fair question. And we will discuss that another time, as you say.
We will indeed. In the meantime, we've been discussing the Women's Rugby World Cup an awful lot. A lot of that's over on More Squad Rugby. We're going to have a video on it this week, looking ahead to the quarterfinals in the next few days.
Which the Springboks and Black Ferns are both in.
Yes, and we'll be looking at every game. We've looked for every game on Pool Stage so far, and all the others will be coming up on More Squad Rugby. So please have a look there. And otherwise, we will see you soon for
more rugby, mate.
Good win over the Pumas.
Yeah, mate.
You very happy with it?
I love Max Jorgensen.
What do you think of Corey Toole?
He's fast, mate.